You get the candid moments like this one.
Yeah, it's like
There's the candid moments, the fun parts.
Yeah.
It's the style of.
Guys,
Oh crap, we're on.
What?
Now I'm gonna do the
I
thing.
got a pencil face.
He's got a pencil face because he's very pensive.
Oh,
Calvinism. I do that, don't I?
we got to welcome everybody back. We haven't done this since May. It's now late September.
Hey, everybody. It's Scherzer and Schnetty. I'm Scherzer.
I'm Schnetty.
That's and we're coming here to cast some pod at you again. Fun on the bun. It's been whatever.
Since May. Last time we did them was May.
It feels
We
like
talked about folklores and American presidents, and we talked about the Squatch and the Mothman, and
which is I still
John
think
Henry.
deep in my heart is the only thing that's truly real in this world is the Squatch. But I think one of the best things we came up with last year was compromise.
Yes,
we have to get compromise back in, but this
which is not happening here apparently.
Oh no, utopian societies, especially Calvinist utopian societies, are no picnic and certainly not up for compromise.
No.
I mean, when you have a theocracy in Geneva, that's kind of putting your foot down and saying, you know what we're not doing here? Talking about it.
No, we're not going to deal with that.
So, all right. I want to connect. Today I was thinking, I want to connect. This is because I'm watching a lot of Ahsoka.
Yeah, well,
and because
we both are.
Yeah, we both are. And Thrawn is.
But some of us are doing it at home, and others are doing it in the classroom with students.
Not with students. On my off period, I am not.
Damn it!
All
right, fine. On his off period.
I'll only watch it.
His extra long off period.
No, I have my lunch in there. My 25-minute duty-free lunch.
And watching Ahsoka's a duty?
So no. I do that during
your lunch around that.
That's a pleasure. That's not a duty. But we've been watching a lot of Ahsoka, and one of the big things there is control. We see that the New Republic and the Empire. This is going to become a Star Wars podcast.
Probably.
The New Republic and the Empire are both still trying to contain control. And what was that perfect line? The New Republic didn't become the government overnight. Yeah. The Empire didn't become the New Republic overnight. And so the trick there is that's a place where you have to have compromise and a lot of different viewpoints. But with Calvinism and utopianism, it's not. So, Coach, you're the best at this. What is utopianism in a nutshell?
The idea. I mean,
give me the rundown. Pretend I am one of our students and know not of this utopianism.
We're talking about this idea of. I mean, is love, peace, and harmony to 1960s-ish as a description?
Oh,
we're all supposed to kind of get along and everybody works together and everybody's in it for everybody else. If I could steal Hillary Clinton's "It Takes a Village" line from right, that whole kind of idea that we're better together.
We're better together.
We're better together.
But there's something.
And if we're together, we're better.
That's true, but there's something more with utopian societies because it's not just we're better together.
Well, they're better than the rest.
Yes.
Right. We're better together because then we're better than the rest.
And to what level does that become? Like, when does that become a format for what we can do with the rest of the time? Like, because we can be a utopian society for our lifetimes, but how do we set up a system that perpetuates the perfect society? How does utopianism answer that question?
This is where the belief in what you're doing has to be there, because you're talking. If you talk about, I forget the name, but there was a utopian society that started in the late 1700s in the United States that was celibate. They were celibate, and they lasted through World War II. Right, and they recruited new members in. Right, they recruited new members because they promoted celibacy. So you weren't quote unquote making new members. You were convincing people to join, right? And that lasted for almost
the Shakers. The Shakers.
A version of I think it's one of the whole you're inviting people to come in and join your community. We are a little bit controlled and under control, but we're a little bit better, and you have to have a belief in that to make it sustain that long.
Yeah, okay. So we're looking at a society that literally is refusing to propagate itself only through ideology.
Yeah. So there's a belief in it. There's a belief. I mean, in our picture here, we got belief system set up. We got a challenge of a belief system happening here, right?
Yeah.
A belief system that was in charge and controlled everything. Speaking of power, right, for 1,000+ years in the Catholic Church, and survives the schism, survives the Avian Pope, survives um, Jan Hus, right? Because Hus was one of the first ones to actually challenge the Pope and the informality of the Pope,
And
right?
Jan Hus basically said, "Why don't we translate the Bible into our language?"
And that kind of stuff that too.
Ooh,
Yeah, right. And they survived that by setting him on, burning him at the stake,
like
right? Burning as a heretic. And it was kind of as I tell my students, it's kind of a, lesson. Don't challenge our power and authority because this is what we're going to do. But it also is a thing where it says they're worried about what he was saying. So maybe there's some truth in what Huss was saying, because Luther eventually basically says in that way, I am just like Huss, right? Because challenging the dogma of the church, challenging what the church truly believes in and why it believes it, in conjunction with what it's doing, right? And that's why utopian societies seem to fall apart, because they lose sight of their belief in what they truly want to do.
Okay. Well, let's look at a couple of examples because I like where you're going with that. I'd like to see where this goes. Let's take a look at Calvin's Geneva, and then we'll look at one of the utopian movements from the Americans.
Okay.
And so, fundamentally, your thesis statement then is what? Give me a thesis statement. And answer. Remember, rephrase the question.
Rephrase the question, right? And so I'll make it even simpler. Utopian societies are destined to fail.
Ooh. Oh, now we got ourselves.
I don't know a cleaner way to do it, because can I say utopian societies are like confederations? Find me one that has survived and done good things
Hold on, I'm trying to look for one.
that out there, right? Because we all know confederations historically have always failed. We can use an
Always.
absolute where they're at. We haven't had one that has not failed. Find me a utopian society and belief that continued with what they wanted, not changed. Because once you start changing, you're
That's
getting
not
away.
society anymore.
Yeah, you're getting away from it, right? Because I can argue, then going to the Americans really quick, because remember the Pilgrims are Calvinists,
The Pilgrims are
but
Calvinists.
they changed the definition of what it means to be a member of the church. Are you a new light? Are you an old light? Have you had your conversion experience? Do you now know you're going to heaven?
Can you
Instead
prove
of
that you walk with Jesus?
yes.
And how do you
And
prove
that goes against Calvin's predestination, where regardless of what you do, you're going to heaven or hell,
it? Okay.
right? So they've even changed it, so that didn't even play out right.
So let's talk about Calvin's Geneva real quick. The Calvin's Geneva has this beautiful built-in clock. It has the predestination.
Yeah.
The predestination, for those of you that don't know, predestination is the belief that God, being the Almighty and being omnipotent and omniscient, knows who's going to be saved. Even if you talk about free will, therefore, God, being once again omniscient, knows whether you're going to choose to follow him or not. So Calvin says, let's quit pretending and let's just figure out. We know who's going to be saved. He knows, capital H, he knows who's going to be saved. So why mess around with this? Let's create a place in Geneva, Switzerland, where basically we can take control of this government. And if you're here with us, that's a pretty dang good sign you're going to be a predestined saved person. So let's just quit with the whole, we see that if you're going to be saved, you're going to be saved one way or the other, blah, blah, blah. And that's what he does. He sets up not only a religious community, but a political community as well. The theocracy he creates is based around faith and study and laws, interpretations.
Because now we're talking about the Reformation.
Yep.
Where now it's about how it's interpreted, how the reader interprets the Bible, the Word of God.
Sure. So Calvin, his interpretation says if you follow these rules, if you study this much, if you do what we ask you, if you don't drink, if you don't dance, if you eat, not as bad as the Puritans, but like simple food,
Yeah.
not like eating an onion just for fun.
The Puritans themselves are Calvinists.
Yeah.
And the Pilgrims are extreme Calvinists, if you really want to, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you don't do all those things, and you're supposed to live like you're going to heaven, like you are the like you've
Yeah.
already been predestined, right? Again, but regardless of what you do, you still might not end up there. So the challenge always becomes, well, okay, if I'm predestined to go to heaven, no matter what I do, right? I'm going to heaven.
Okay.
So what if I do bad things? If I'm already predestined, because Calvin remembers taking a line out of the Bible, I knew you before you were even born, right? And using that for predestination. So if how I act on earth shouldn't matter now, does it? So
Well,
if I rape, plunder, and pillage on earth, but I've already been predestined to go to heaven, I still go to heaven under predestination. Yes.
Well, if we're looking at it that way, then there's got to be. So Calvin creates the system that he has to stop that.
Yeah, but that's kind of the thought with that's how I interpret Calvin all the time, right? If I've been predestined, does it matter how I act on earth? I know he says we're all supposed to act like
Yeah.
we're what the pilgrims will call visible saints.
Visible
So
saints.
they're going to use
City
the term,
upon a hill,
yeah,
all that stuff.
right. That's I know he's talking that way. He doesn't use those terms; those come a little bit later.
Yeah.
But this idea that we're supposed to act that way because we're living under this faith and belief system, right?
But I would argue there's a built-in defense there because we're mortal, we're fallible. We were
Yes.
wrong about this person. So if you do bad things,
But can God be wrong about that person?
ah,
He's already predestined him.
but
Or
you
her.
know, you came to the city, you couldn't hack it. Therefore, you weren't actually predestined. You were never predestined. You just thought you were, and you deluded
In
yourself.
his eyes.
In well, Calvin's eyes.
Yeah, Calvin eyes. Not maybe not God's eyes.
But
Maybe Calvin's the one that's wrong.
well, you could argue that, but at the same time, Calvin's got the political side as well that can
Yes.
push against you.
Yes.
And that's the thing. That's what he needs.
That's the difference with the Calvinists,
Oh,
with the Lutherans, with the Presbyterians.
Calvin's checking off boxes.
Yeah.
Calvin's Calvin's checking off boxes and doing progress reports.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing it, you're gone. Oh, that's diabolical.
Well, we see it play out in the crucible, right?
Oh God, yes.
Which of the Ten Commandments does John Proctor forget?
Oh, I can't remember.
The one he's committing.
The adultery.
Adultery.
Yeah, can't.
Adultery, John.
Adultery.
As is reminded by his wife when he's rattling off. You done? All right. Cool. Thank you. It should.
There you go. There you go. So there you go. Which is all right. You want your fun fact of the day? I was in the Crucible in high school.
Oh yeah.
I was Reverend Nathan Hale.
Oh.
I got to yell out the Latin. It was awesome. But Nathan Hale was even deluded. The idea that you could like you could tear it apart just by repeating the rules enough.
Well, you have you. It's by the time the Calvinists come along during the Reformation, right, and applying it to politics and applying it to society, right. Now you have this really power structure challenging the church, not just a religious structure that Luther's challenging with. Now you got a bunch of people, whether it's the Huguenots in France or the Puritans in England who are Calvinists, right, challenging the power structure in the Anglican Church, which
It was already a challenge to the power structure.
which you can still argue is very, very Catholic, especially in the
I don't know what
1600s.
you're talking about.
Right, especially in the 1600s, right?
Oh yeah, in the 1600s, we were still like trying to break themselves apart.
So,
It's like,
and then Puritans purify the Anglican Church,
yep.
decatholify the Anglican Church, right? So you get that power structure there. And on the continent, you have the 30 Years' War. In England, you have the English Civil War. And there's underlying religious aspects of it, but there's a whole bunch of political stuff attached to it as well.
Okay.
Right, so a utopian society, like I said, find me one that eventually works out or doesn't run itself into extinction by not procreating, basically, right? I mean, the Shakers are a good example, except for they disappeared because they practiced celibacy. Good on them, but that also might explain because most of them were over the age of 60 anyways.
There was that. It was one of those situations where it's like they didn't feel like they had to do anymore. But I do remember like one of the last Shaker meetings, there were only like 4 people left, 2 men and 2 women. You're like, couldn't break your rules now.
They're too old now.
Too old now.
Well,
Welcome to science.
Yeah.
So okay, so then let me go back to the original question. No, you're perfectly fine. Is Calvin's Utopia doomed because of its religious belief or its political machinations?
I think most utopians are doomed by the political power structures of it.
'Cause
There's a belief there that starts out that drives it, starts it, but then people become people. People become mistake prone. People become, we're not perfect, right?
yeah,
We're not that. Even if we're based out of a religious thing, we use the references like we're followers of Jesus, we're children of God, but we're imperfect because we are imperfect because we're
we are sinful creatures.
yeah, I'm just a poor sinful being, right?
Yeah.
So we're tempted all the time, and that temptation sometimes gets the better of us. So if temptation's getting the better of you, can you have a utopia?
Ooh. One of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett, talks about utopian societies in his books. And one of the things he says is like there's this guy that's trying to go through and he thinks he can figure out whether you're a criminal or not just based on the mathematics of your skull shape and stuff like the phrenology.
The phrenology,
Little
yeah.
phrenology. He basically makes fun of that. But the idea is, do utopian societies then, do they take people and say, this is the way people are, how can we make them better? Or do they say, this is the way people should be, what should we do if they don't meet this criteria? That's the big question. So what did Calvin do? I think Calvin said, this is the way people should be. What do we do if they don't meet up?
Yeah.
And that is a doom from the beginning.
Yeah, because if you tell people if you don't meet this standard, then you're going to hell.
Oh, they don't.
I mean, I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Oh no, yeah, they don't.
But you're going to hell, and there's kind of no out, right? If you didn't like the Catholic Church out with indulgences and penances and confession and all the things you do after you make a confession to the priest, right?
Yeah.
With all the rosaries and the prayers and everything else. If you don't do that, and if you don't have an out, if you don't have a way for people to make themselves feel better, can we use that word, right? To feel good about themselves, cleanse their anxiety about what they've done wrong.
Restoration. I think it's restoration to the community. The concept we're looking at here is restoration to the community. How do we apologize and then be restored to the place? Locke talked about that. How do we rehabilitate? How do we restore you to your community?
And I don't think we get that with Calvinism. I don't think there's a way to do that with Calvinism, both with his religious ideas and his political ideas. The Catholic Church gave us stuff like purgatory and private confession with all the other stuff. Luther goes, faith alone, grace alone, Bible alone, right? That stuff. Yes, you are redeemed because you have faith by God's good grace, right? Be happy in that, right? We're a poor, sinful man, right?
Yeah.
Be happy about that. Be joyful about it. Smile about it. Luther would say, right? You're a sinful person. Accept it, and then also accept the fact that if you accept it and you confess it, that you're going to be saved.
That's going to be
that grace of God is going to be there, right?
Yeah.
So we have with two extremes here because I don't see the out, if you want to call it an out with Calvin.
So Luther basically puts that in there from the beginning. This is the thing. It's like it's basically like the Catholic Church, which built it from the beginning. There is confession, there all that stuff, and then you got Calvinism, who says this is the program. Stick with the program. If you don't stick with the program, thank you for playing. Get out of the city.
Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. There's your modern example. No, Jim Jones is.
Calvin is totally pissed off at us.
Oh God.
They just told Jim Jones.
We are not equating Calvinism with Jim Jones. We are saying that it is the dogmatic idea. Is modern day Calvinism the same as Genevan Calvinism? I don't know.
Modern day Calvinists.
The Presbyterians?
The Presbyterians. I don't. I'm gonna play it a little ignorant. I don't know what. I know that because you have John Knox in the Presbyterians of Scotland, and that's where, and those are the Calvinists of Scotland. But did they?
I think they've reformed.
Yeah,
I think they've reformed as well. I think most people, especially if your religion has, are there any Calvinists left?
The Unitarian churches in New England, because those were the old Puritan churches.
Yeah.
But because I know the change. I know the change was this idea of visible lights. This idea of, hey, yeah, maybe God will tell you that you've had it, and you now you could be the visual representation on earth. Those types of things, and you only have to you could be half members of the church and all that other stuff, but that's political structure, like we talked about in Massachusetts Bay Colony,
Yeah.
right? So did they start seeing, okay, maybe we get to find it out there? I mean,
Well, I mean, the
okay,
Puritans.
look at the Millerites and the Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a definite end day too, right?
Yeah.
Calvin's got one, but it's on the day of your death. The Seventh-day Adventists and the Millerites of the 1840s literally had a day.
Like,
right? They picked a day, a month, a day, and a year, and said this is when the Earth is going to
This is
end.
it.
Do this, and then when it didn't happen, they said, "Oh, our math was wrong."
I do love the Millerites; those are fun.
Right?
But okay, so if I'm open to being taught by anybody who listens to this and comments and is like, tell me now. I believe that all Calvinist churches have reformed in some way, or they've redefined.
Or they redefined it. Yes.
They've redefined because let's be honest, the first draft is always your worst.
But the idea
It's pretty.
is that to live like you're going to heaven.
Yeah.
Okay, isn't that the same? Isn't that kind of basing off of the way the Catholic Church wanted you to act, the way
gosh.
Luther's talking about it? We should all, again, going back, and I've used the phrase before, and I'm going to steal it from my pastors at church, right? We're followers of Jesus, right?
Uh-huh.
We're children of God. That's the way we should be acting.
Sure.
Knowing that we're that we're going to make mistakes.
So then, not to like totally kind of derail for a second, but then is Calvinism just asking too much too quickly of its followers?
Ooh.
Because that's the thing. Calvin's probably when I took this class,
Is Calvin a little too early?
Possibly.
I thought it's too early in history or even in the Reformation.
It strikes me as Calvin's the guy that's got a really good idea, and he says we're supposed to live like this, and I'm gonna encourage you to live like this. It was executed poorly.
Yeah.
It's the first draft of a game. It's the first draft of anything. It's the idea. What was it? Ernest Hemingway says the first draft of anything is crap.
Yeah.
So it's like Calvin was like, look, here's the idea. The idea is that we are predestined, ergo you should live like this, which Anglicanism, Catholicism, all these other groups, they all believe the same thing. Live like you are going to heaven and that you know it is real. So Calvin says, great, now we're going to codify that. And everyone's like, yeah, that's going to work out.
Yeah.
What do we do if we don't work? And Calvin's that brand new teacher. The brand new teacher is like super into discipline.
Yeah.
No one gets, no, this assignment is closed. This test is done.
Yeah.
And then you start learning as a teacher, you've got to have some leeway and some grace. Yeah. Did he have enough grace in his order? Did he have enough grace in his order? Because that's what Luther had.
Yeah.
In fact, it's 90% of what Luther had. And I'm going to get Lutherans calling him, what? I'm Utopia. It's going to be the grace.
Yeah.
And the Catholics kind of forgot about the grace and got to.
And that's why it took the Catholics 30 plus years to come up with the Council of Trent. Which they debated that for 25 years or so and go, okay, yeah, maybe, we got to redefine ourselves. So Calvin, that's a good point, because if it's too much too fast, then you're worrying the power structure of the French monarchy.
Oh, absolutely.
You're worrying the power structure of the HRE. Because
politically,
Reformation was fine when it was religious for the HRE. Mm-hmm. Remember, we had the Peace of Augsburg, right? If you were Lutheran, if you were Catholic, it didn't matter. Pick your principality, share churches together, whatever you need to do, just not fight anymore. And then the Calvinists, the Huguenots in France and the Calvinists in the HRE, that's the 30 Years' War, right? That's that group for the most part, right? Because it becomes a power structure vacuum. It becomes a threat to the political power.
Because it was a theocracy. It was a full-fledged theocracy, and it was a city-state inside your country. And that becomes a big, big problem.
And that's why Switzerland gets its independence at the end of
Switzerland gets its independence.
Because you need to be able to handle that. So, too much, too soon, too early?
Too much, too soon, too early.
Too political?
Because automatically, look at all the Calvinist offshoots, the Presbyterians, the Puritans, all that stuff.
Yeah.
They're going to change the rules constantly. The Puritans coming to America are going to change the rules constantly.
And then you can contribute that to the First Great Awakening in the 1720s.
Yes.
In Western Europe and in the New World.
We can forget to teach that it happened in both sections of it.
And then the Second Great Awakening in the 1830s-ish. Mm-hmm. In the United States, you have the the hellfire and damnation districts in upstate New York, right? But you also get a little bit of that again in Western Europe. This kind of more of a revival of religion because we're coming off the French Revolution where they basically secularized all of France, changed the dang calendar,
and murdered a ton of people.
yeah, to get everything out of there. So they have this little revival back in. Napoleon starts it, and then when they bring back Louis XVIII, right, he kind of reinvites the church back into power.
Remind me, what was it called when he invited the church back? What was it called when Napoleon did that? It started with a C, I think.
Napoleon, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't remember.
But this idea of bringing it back in, knowing that, understanding it means something to some people, maybe more than they ever thought in France, because France from the Huguenot period on is starting to become more and more secular, right? And then definitely when you get to Louis XIV, right?
So to sum up where we're at, because we're jumping across the pond now, we're getting further ahead.
Yeah.
Calvinism.
Like you said, we got to make sure there's that connection because it's going on. At least the Western half of Europe. Eastern Europe, very, very political. They will stick to, not political, sorry, religious, right?
Yeah.
If you're Catholic, you're Catholic. If you're Lutheran, you're Lutheran. If you're Eastern Orthodox, you're Eastern Orthodox. Do your thing. Don't bother the others.
Everybody plays on their mat and nobody touches each other.
Yeah.
But Calvinism says we can do this now, and we can, because once you get the big revival, Reformation, people are starting to think, not to like get too ghost adventures with it, but it does spark that question of, if we're doing this so quickly, could this be the end? Is this it? And that kind of like that.
Well, and that brings in the witch scares of the 1600s.
Oh yeah, we got to clean house.
That happens. Yeah, we got to get all of this darkness and all of this evil out.
So jumping across the pond, so Calvinism comes up with it. Calvin tries to make it. I was going to use a video game reference, but I don't think you'd catch on too much. Not that you don't know video games, but this is.
No, I don't know a lot of video games, so you'd be right.
Bethesda is a very, very big video game company, but they are infamous for releasing big, big games for big, big prices, completely filled with bugs. Like heads fly off, weird things happen.
Oh, so what Microsoft was accused of doing when they first introduced Windows?
Absolutely, introducing all these bugs to make sure you constantly update it and stuff like that. It's the same thing. In fact, now
Bethesda, not saying Microsoft actually did that, just going what was our perception.
We love you, great overlord. But like, actually, funny story. Microsoft now owns Bethesda, so
well, not saying, just saying.
But Bethesda has been, bugged out to hell, right? Like, and they barely put it back together. I think John Calvin, and this is where I'm going to be burned in effigy. I think John Calvin had the Bethesda game of religion. He had a really awesome idea with really interesting possibilities that really did some interesting things when you look at it, but fundamentally it was bugged. And it took a lot of modders, people that took the game and basically outside of the company that fixed the game and tweaked it and maneuvered it and made it better. So I think, yeah, Calvinism is the Bethesda of religion.
But isn't that what we like about utopian societies?
What's that?
They're supposed to be this great idea. They look great on paper, right? And there's always something wrong, 2 or 3, that then we can pick apart and pull about the parts that we like.
Yeah.
Right? Sounds a little like communism as well.
Oh, you're gonna do that.
Well, no, but okay, communism. It's the same time period in history.
Communism does sound
across the pond.
Yeah.
Those utopian societies in the United States
are communist.
1820s to 1840s. Karl Marx's manifesto with what's the German guy he writes with? I apologize.
Friedrich Engels.
Yeah, Engels, right? 1848. It's right in that time period.
Oh God, that's right.
It's in that time period. What better way to come up with an entire nation, right, where everybody comes together and is doing stuff based on, the greater good for the society, not the individual. So
hold on, I had to close my door. There's screaming children outside. We should probably check on that, but I don't really care. So yeah, this is going to be that communist movement. This idea that we can all work together, live together, very much like the early Christian church.
The early communes, right?
Communes.
I think that the issue is why the Shakers last so long is they're small, but they got too small, and they had to go away because they wouldn't do this.
They could. For those of you at home, The gesture he's making is not particularly rude, just very suggestive.
Yeah. So they couldn't come together, literally,
No.
right? And with then some of them get too big.
Such as?
Soviet Union.
Oh,
I mean, if we're talking about what should be a communal. The objective, if remember, the objective of communism is to get rid of the government because we're going to be in basically a utopian state society where everybody's working together, everybody's sharing, everybody's get what based on their need, right? So we don't have that. We have this great social order. That's a utopian society,
true.
especially in the 1800s.
And if you look, it actually goes along with your thesis. It was doomed to fail because it couldn't find the right belief system. Instead of believing in an all powerful being that could never do the wrong thing, they chose to put it into people which constantly do the wrong thing. It was once again, it was Geneva, all politics, and the belief was there, but all politics wrong, but it's the opposite. It's all politics, no belief.
Yeah. Well, what's the line? Absolute power group corrupts absolutely.
Yep.
You start giving people a bunch of power and no check on that power, right? And somebody going, "What are we doing?" Right? We run into those issues. We see it. We see it all the time, regardless of the form of government. But again, utopians, communism, as we know it, as the way it's written, as we know it, is that time period of history where it's happening. Because there's utopian societies in England, there's utopian societies in France in the 1830s, 1840s. That's where this. So it's not just uniquely American, where you get something like the Oneida Colony, and you get
The Millerites.
the Millerites, and you get these other societies. The one that Hawthorne was in Brookline, Brookline, right? This intellectual commune, right? That basically dissolves itself because they can't agree on how they're going to rebuild the Great Hall when it burned down because they're too overly smart, they're too overly analytical, they're too overly and some people want to have a little more power than others
Because they feel that their position requires it.
Yes.
So, wow. Thinking about that, like the utopian societies fall to either one side or the other. Either they don't have too much belief or they don't have enough belief. It's either too much politics or it's too much belief.
Yeah.
And you have to find that right balance. Who came the closest? Now we know the Shakers went on to like 1960, like the last bit.
Yeah, post World War II. So it's very
Post World War II, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But is there any society that's actually last that can fix it? I mean, that's the thing. It always gets out of whack at some point, right? The Millerites had belief and not enough structure, and then when it happened and they lost their
and they had that date, and then they moved it for another year because they made a miscalculation that didn't happen. They become the 7-day Adventists.
they have to reform. They have to reform. They have to change.
Change it, right?
They structured it, great Seventh-day Adventism, and kept the belief.
Yeah.
Like I'm not accusing Seventh-day
No,
Adventism.
no, no, no. The belief is still there. It's just
They had to pulled up
okay,
the.
we're not going to pick a year anymore because we start picking days and years. We get the heaven gates closed.
Too much. Oh, now let's talk about that for a
Because
second.
that's too much belief.
It's too much belief, and it's
And those guys were super nerds. So those were IT guys. Those were like if you would call up computer customer service, you'd get those people.
Mhm.
You wouldn't get outsourcing in the early 90s. You call that mansion, and those people who answer the phone are working you through your computer issues and IT issues.
Yeah.
That's who those people were. Those people had money, and that's the other thing. You look at these utopian societies that happen in the United States, that happen in France, in England, starting with the Industrial Revolution. It's not the poor, right? It's not the peasants of the 1600s that's following it. It's the upper middle class and the upper middle class and higher that's starting to buy into some of these things.
I would argue it's more the intellectual ones that needs. That's the same thing. It's
that
like
needs a belief.
that will need to structure their beliefs. The more the higher you're educated, the more your belief has to have structure. It seems, if you look at these things, right? John Calvin was a highly educated man. For his time, he was extremely high. He was also an extremely smart man. His belief was there, but the rational side of him was so strong and had been so trained, he had to create that system. The Millerites. Miller was a smart man, was an educated man.
They always seem to be that way. They just need, and I think the problem with that is I can't touch it, I can't see it, so I don't believe it, right?
Yeah, and
Because true belief is you
faith
got a
without seeing.
scientific mind. It's faith without seeing. Thank you.
It's
Right?
faith without seeing, but
I don't believe unless I can see it.
but
Right?
especially an enlightenment educated rational thinker is going to say, I want to believe, but
Well,
I need
that's where all those people like to point to St. Thomas.
Aquinas. Yeah, the
Well,
lot.
no, St. Thomas, doubting Thomas.
Oh yeah,
I won't believe it until I get to put my
fingers
fingers
through
in the
the
holes.
holes.
Right? And Jesus is like, Thomas, why here, do it. But why didn't you believe like the rest of them beforehand? Again, paraphrasing.
Yeah,
So I don't want anybody going, he's got the line wrong. I know I got the line wrong. But it's basically what it is. And that's why like forensic scientists love St. Thomas because he's using forensic science. Right? It is you. Right? It is you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm always in. And it's not. It's okay. Time to get a little theological here. It's not Peter. Thomas is not Peter.
no, Peter is
Peter, you are the Lord. You are the Christ.
all
You are
faith,
this. Right?
no structure.
Yeah, exactly right. Peter, you're going to be the rock, son. I just need you to. I just
Tone it down a bit. Put the sword back.
I need you to do one more thing. I need you to doubt me 3 times, and then you'll learn your lesson. And once you learn your lesson, then you're going to be the rock that which I built my church on.
Yeah, but then you got Thomas, who's the rational thinker, who's like, okay, let's get this. And so once again, we got to have that structure. So what am I trying to say with this? So looking at a utopian society now, if we were to make a utopian society now, oh no, I want to no,
I
sorry,
think
hold
we
on.
call them a cult now.
Oh, we do.
We call them
We
cults
call
now
them cults now.
because
So why are they now cults instead of utopian experiments?
they failed.
That's it?
Utopians fail. I'm gonna make it simple. I think utopian societies throughout history have failed.
Mm-hmm.
That now it's just a cult, right? You have Jim Jones,
Yep. Going
right?
back
You
to him.
have the Reverend Sun Young Moon,
Yep.
right? You have that we're going back to the 70s for those types of things. You have the Heaven Gate cult, right? You have the Branch Davidians. They're cults,
You
right?
have the Nexium cults.
Yeah, we call them cults now because they're again there's something underlying that is just not linked with ra-
Rationale.
rationale, real world thinking, whatever you want to say, right? That doesn't link with the more general population. But this is also, and I'm devil's advocate myself here a little bit. This is what those scientific minds say about religions, right? Why do you go to church every Sunday? What's the point of all that, right? What's the point of that? But we've seen that argument before. Isn't that Pasquale's wager?
That's Pasquale's wager. It's
Yeah.
also the entire works of Carl Sagan.
Yeah.
Not an unkind way, just sort of a why are you looking for religion in a small room when religion is all around you?
I mean, Pascal's wager, right? I would. What have I lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I believe and I do this, I lose a little bit of time. And if it turns out to be false, I lose a little bit of time. You don't believe, and what it turns out to be true. What have you lost, right?
Everything.
And that kind of explains, the people like Newton. And Newton is scientist but religious, right? What's the Einstein quote about religion and science? One without the other is this, and the other.
Oh,
I can't remember the top of my head. You know what I'm
basically,
talking.
basically, the idea is that Albert Einstein said that religion and science were completely married and interlinked.
Yeah, they have to go together.
They have to go together.
You just can't do without the other, right?
One cannot live without the other because, like science,
He's got a
science.
better quote.
Yeah. Oh, he said it much better because he was pithy as hell.
Yeah.
But you'd say Pascal's wager, which is basically, if I'm going to be religious because if I'm wrong,
I've lost his time.
I've met some friends and we hang out and we have Christmas. I'm going to argue Patton Oswalt, modern day comedian.
Yeah.
He's like, what if I 1000% believe that there was a giant sphincter in the sky that if I wasn't nice to everybody I meet and give everything and do the best I could, I would be sucked up into that sphincter and tormented forever. Even if that was the craziest thing you'd ever hear, would you not encourage it? Because look, man, Patton's being amazing.
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst thing that could happen if you believe and you're just a nice person, not necessarily a good person, but a nice person. What does it hurt?
It's belief, right?
Yeah.
But you have to stick to that belief, and I think that's where the utopians lose it. The utopian beliefs lose it because they
Built
don't
too much structure.
they put too much structure in it.
Okay.
And I think that's why the Catholic Church fails. They put too much structure in, and they got too much power, too much control, right?
So they would say the Catholic Church fails before the Reformation.
Before the Reformation,
Yeah, I
yes.
was about to say.
Yes, no,
I imagine that the Catholic Church would have something to say, and His Holiness would come out and be like, "Look, guys,
no, okay. All disclosure, I grew up Catholic, right? But you've seen these
that
changes.
explains so much."
You've had what the Vatican II
Yep.
proclamation in the 50s, right? So they've rechanged, they've restructured themselves.
Francis here is changing things left and
Francis,
right.
yeah, which is
Whoa. I mean, he's got some ideas. This man does.
he's got a lot of people in the church that don't like him either. He does because, right? How much society and modern beliefs and modern politics and modern economics belongs in religion.
Well, when you're a 2,000-year-old thing and you've seen the structure come up before, and you've seen that you've had to watch the belief in the structure even out. This is probably a very tense time because there's a lot of structure coming in that's changing. What do we do with the belief? So, looking at
But there was a day when the belief would challenge and counterpoint the structure, right? Instead of, as some will argue within the Catholic Church today, they're bending to the structure, especially on the American version of the Catholic Church, bending to the social structure and not sticking to the core beliefs. Look what's happening with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. In certain dioceses, they're not allowed to take communion. They've been denied the right of communion because of their stance on social issues that the bishops that run those archdioceses say violate the teachings of the church. Right?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's got to be rough. I mean, not that Joe's not going to go outside of Scranton. Scranton Joe's going to stay where he's going to stay, but like that's still one of those.
You kind of have that how much are you the Methodist Church.
Oh, let's look at
The Methodist Church in the news this whole past year, basically, right? About LBGQ members, LBGQ preachers, LBGQ flags, everything that's happening here. You get this whole bunch of Methodist churches that left. This is we're losing the connection to what we believe in our faith by bringing in all these social issues.
Same thing with the American Episcopal Church. It switched into the American Anglican Church and the American Episcopal Church. It schismed as well. Same situation. LGBTQ situations. Also, not just that, a lot of really weird fundamental structure stuff, like some bishops and things like that, higher ups in the church, denying the resurrection, which was one of the two major beliefs of Christianity. Literally saying, "No, it wasn't a magic trick. It was pretty cool, wasn't it?" Oh man, oh no, man, there's some good stuff. So the question now becomes, how do you strike that balance between belief and structure? And can we? I mean, the religions, the major denominations of Christianity have been doing that for years.
They're trying to, right?
Hinduism's had to do that this year because of the break of the caste.
Memberships of churches, memberships of mosques, memberships of synagogues dropping
dramatically.
Yeah,
Dramatically.
wise, right? Yeah, and dramatic with 5, 6, 10% over years, right?
That's actually many Christian churches are facing a 40 to 50% loss.
That's I mean, we talk about secularization happening, and that's the social issues going, and they're butting up against
the belief,
religious belief. So you change your religious belief. I mean, and again, if you're doing things that the church is talking about, even going all the way back to the guys up on the screen there, right? You can still honor, love, hang out, with everybody, right? Even if you don't, if you think they're going to go to hell because of their lifestyle, that doesn't mean you treat them like garbage.
No.
Right? You treat them like you want to be treated because you yourself are supposed to be a follower of Christ. Right?
So, weird thought experiment. Could we have a Calvinist style, not necessarily Calvinism, but Calvinist style theocracy, city state in America today?
And if so, why is it Austin?
Really won't be us.
Probably Dallas.
Uh,
Could you, in your opinion, and then I'll tell you mine. Could
in like define city. Give me a size.
I'm talking Metroplex.
Oh.
I'm talking
I don't think so. I,
Houston size.
I don't. It's too many people. You're gonna have too much.
Okay.
Too much different.
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah, but St. Paul's right next to Minneapolis, so they go together. There's just a river between them.
Yeah, but
I
a
mean,
river.
that would be a river runs through it. Is that what you're going with?
I was going to go with that. Yeah.
I mean,
You can't throw a Brad Pitt movie in. What's the point?
yeah. Something that big? No, I don't think so.
Could it be right next to a major metropolitan center?
Well, okay, we keep politics, right? Let's just make it local. It could be close because look at Harris County.
Okay, I'm looking at
the political democratic makeup of Harris County.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the political democratic makeup of Montgomery County.
Ooh.
One of the most Republican counties in the entire state of Texas.
It bleeds red.
Right next to one of the most Democratic counties in the state of Texas.
We do like to get together for farmers markets, though.
Yeah, we do like to do that. See, that's our common ground. There's a farmers market?
Look, I don't care what you believe about guns, but let's go get some homemade squash.
Exactly. The homemade pickles, the jellies and the jams.
But Jethro, do you want some quiche?
I think you can make it on.
Do you want some quiche? I asked you a question, boy. Would you like to enjoy this quiche with me?
So I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can do it that big, but something outside, right?
A smaller quiche?
Smaller quiche. Personal pain.
So, okay, the best thing I could think of are the Mennonites and the Amish. Those are small religious groups that still coexist outside.
But
now
they're not near big metropolitan.
No, they're not nearly big metropolitan areas, but they are still coexisting.
Yeah.
Now they're being threatened, not necessarily like with guns and such, but with cell phones and movies. And
that and the economics of the situation.
It's getting too hard.
And they're starting to realize that if they sell some of their stuff, so that's why some of them might have a phone for the entire community to use out at the end of the street because we're doing mail order stuff and stuff like that.
I worked for an Amish furniture company. Well, I say worked. They let me stay there, and sometimes they were good friends of mine that let me work in the store. And I publicly, I want to say I'm sorry I was the worst employee you probably ever had. Thank you for the opportunity, though. I'm just going to acknowledge that. But the thing there is, you had former Amish people that would usually drive the trucks that would bring the Amish furniture to there. They had strong connections to the communities, of which there are many in Texas as well, but they had given it up. So I was going to sit there and say that those are still communities that are still thriving. But once again, if you look, they've all had to structurally change. So I would like to say that Calvinism, like a Calvinist style theocracy, could work on a small enough scale. On a community scale, I think it could work up to maybe even the size of Tomball. I think we could have a 10,000 strong.
Old Tomball or gentrified Tomball?
Oh, is there a difference anymore?
That's why I went gentrified Tomball. I said old Tomball, like 80s, 90s Tomball.
Ooh.
When it was just four corners.
90s Tomball.
Yeah, when it was just
90s Tomball. When it was 7,800.
Yeah.
But I think we can actually do it now with 10,000 Tomball. It's gentrified, sure. And I can say that because I lived there.
If they're offended by that, then they don't know what they moved into.
If they're afraid of that, they don't know. But I think they can actually work. A small enough space.
Be a nice social experiment.
It would be a nice social experiment.
And religious experiment if
and religion.
Off what Calvin wanted to start.
So it'd have to be a really interesting thought process. Here's a random
But not to be that guy, but the devil's advocate guy, will the government allow it to happen?
Oh God, no.
Right? Because
no.
I mean,
our track record is not good in that.
Yeah. Because there's always, what are they doing in there?
It's an attack. That's a whole other question for another time. Is do we still have enough freedom to make our own societies within our society? And the answer is probably nah. But
not based on the recent 30-year actions of the ATF.
Jeez, yeah.
Rich.
Oh, Waco. Oh my Lord. The fact that we have to name more than one scares the hell. But the interesting thing, I think the reason we keep having these utopian societies, these cults and these groups, and we keep changing our religion is because fundamentally we believe there is a way to perfect human beings. And I think we need to move away from that because that leads to stuff like
Yeah,
eugenics.
yeah. That's a discussion for another day.
That's a whole other one. But
Yeah.
I think what we need to start doing is taking a look at how people are and saying, how can we soften the edges and make it easier? Start with where people are instead of
But
starting
that,
with
that,
people.
that does though get into the arguments of then, is speech punishable? Because softening the edges might have the main way we talk and reference people and talk about things, right? So can you? Because they're doing that in Canada, right?
They were doing that in Britain first.
They were doing, yeah, this
Yeah.
idea where they're going to subjugate speech, and in a country that's supposed to be built on, I don't know, First Amendment, first thing, freedom of speech, right?
See,
Do we have to acquiesce to people's feelings? Do we have to acquiesce to people's beliefs?
so with that, my first instinct as an American and as a lover of democracy and freedom is to say, no, you should be able to, and we should teach you what not to, that it's not polite. But as a father of a boy with autism, and the fact that my son has had kids who really recognize he was having trouble, and they've yelled at, and I know they yell at a lot of people, but they've used the R word, and I'm going to say it. They've called him retard, and I hate that word. I hate everything. My brother-in-law, before he passed, he's autistic. He was mid-functioning autistic, and they called him the same thing. And it's like, while I want to say everyone should have that freedom of speech, a part of me is like, yeah, but if we don't protect the most vulnerable of our society, we're failing them. See, I'm torn in the middle there. I
Yeah.
don't know what to believe. I want people to be able to say what they want to say. I think instead of letting the government allow us to do that, we should teach our parents, the parents that we're in, to say, look, you can say this, but as a good person, maybe you should think twice. If Bill Burr says it as a joke, three-quarters of the room laughs, but, you know,
Yeah, that's getting getting away with the
that's true.
comedy,
That's true. That's true.
comedy end of it, because we can't.
Comedy's a different animal. Comedy
Comedy
different,
should be a different animal.
should be a different
And you're
animal.
right, polite society, right? But that becomes a generational thing to future generations. It's really hard to deal with the older generations. They're kind of set in their ways, the way they talk and the way they think, and they've got 50, 60, 70, 80 years of think like that. How quickly then can they correct themselves and fix themselves?
So you're
Right?
saying
And
kill all the
what?
old people?
Huh? Well, no, I think working in a public school, you've got to be mindful of the words you use
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the way you would refer to things all the time. And smart people can figure it out and realize it. And I talk completely different here with my particular cursing word choices that I love to use out in the real world.
Darn
What in the
right.
world was that, right? But in here, I can't do that. So now, if you were to take some other members of my family, they can't flip that switch. They don't know any better to flip that switch, right? That's just what we grew up in, and that goes back to maybe a nature versus nurture story, right?
Which is another topic for another day,
Yeah,
which would be a big one. But it's like, yeah, so it's like, I'm with you. I think utopian societies are really great. I think we should think about them as a thought experiment just to see where we can improve our society, because a lot of the structure that comes out of this stuff makes things better.
yeah. But then the society itself blows up.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we
Oh,
pick and choose what we like out of it.
controlled detonations of like really good societies. Like we're gonna let them run for a little bit and then like let them explode, and then we pull them back in and we start another one.
Well,
Experiments.
that's a whole different. We had that discussion in the hallway, and you said I couldn't go there with this discussion
Oh, right, right, right.
about experiments. So we'll leave that alone. All right. And on that note,
I think we're good.
I think we're good because somebody's got to go watch football games.
And it's not me.
No, it's not you. It's me.
Bye, everybody.
Take it easy.